Um, as Mei-Lin said, I'm sort of been nominated as a kind of an emergency guest chair for the meeting as Nele was pulled away at the last minute. But it's really great to be with you, as always, with this group of really interesting, like-minded people. I think Mei-Lin had asked that maybe I can start the meeting off with just a little bit of a look forward to this year's UN General Assembly and what's going to come after in terms of what we see. As Mei-Lin said, I'm the Chief Digital Officer for UNDP, and we're involved in a number of the kind of digital cooperation type events and some of the kind of other processes going on, as are a number of the people that will be on the call today. I guess maybe the first thing to say, this is the 77th session of the UN General Assembly. It's probably, obvious that in some ways the General Assembly will have a bit of flavor to it because of the Ukraine issues at hand. And so there will be a lot of, I think, let's say, headspace given to some of the issues around the knock-on effects of the food security crisis and some of those things. But digital cooperation issues in particular remain very high on the agenda. We're also fortunate that just in time for the General Assembly, the new UN Tech Envoy has been appointed. And the new UN Tech Envoy is Amandeep Gill. Amandeep was actually, excuse me, involved in the very early kind of digital cooperation efforts that were put together by the high-level panel on digital cooperation by the Secretary General. And that was back in, now I don't want to guess the year, 2016 or no, maybe 2017 or 18. I'm sorry, I don't have the dates. But that panel, which was chaired by, thanks Liv, that panel that was chaired by Jack Ma and Melinda Gates found a number of kind of recommendation areas around everything from digital public goods to connectivity and digital inclusion and digital capacity building. And that's been the foundation of a lot of what this group has been talking about. Pardon me. And so the Amandeep was the secretary of that panel and has now come back to be the UN Tech Envoy. And in his role as Tech Envoy, he'll be doing a very important kind of coordination of a lot of the efforts going on across the UN system, but also shaping some of the kind of positioning of the UN. How does the UN understand what the particularly the tech industry is doing, and some of these huge issues that are coming out, including how to leverage digital technology to achieve the SDGs, how to ensure that we're approaching technologies like AI in a kind of ethical way, and so on and so forth. So Amandeep is on board, and there's quite a lot of other attention still being paid to the digital cooperation agenda, despite the distractions of Ukraine and things as well. This UNGA will have a really high-level event around the digital public infrastructure, digital public goods agenda. And Liv, I think you might be speaking about that, so I won't go into depth on it. But basically, this is a group of partners associated with the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And the idea is to bring together a number of heads of state, as well as some kind of well-known philanthropists, including Nandan Nilekani and the Gates, Melinda and Bill Gates, because there's starting to be momentum formed around the digital public infrastructure agenda and the need for financing and funding of that agenda. So how do we build up the market of digital public goods that will really contribute to strong and inclusive digital public infrastructures as well? And so that's going to be kind of a major milestone at this UNGA event. There's a couple of other things going on, but what we're starting to see now is that we're going to start to see the kind of roadmap or the path to the Summit for the Future, which is going to happen at next year's, or coincide with next year's UNGA. And the Summit for the Future is something that was identified in the Secretary General's report called Our Common Agenda. If you haven't had a look at that, I would recommend having a look particularly at the sections around digital, as I know that's your interest. But the idea is that there are 7 or 8 kind of critical topics there that will be taken up at the Summit for the Future, including the idea of creating a global digital compact. And the global digital compact, the idea there is that there would be a multi-stakeholder I want to be careful with my words because I don't yet know what the legal definition will be, but it will be a kind of statement, a multi-stakeholder statement or agreement, a kind of a compact around where we see the world going in digital cooperation and the highest priority issues. And so they will cover some of these things like digital public infrastructure, like the ethical use of AI and the reclaiming of the digital commons as the Common Agenda report outlines. So these are some of the biggest issues on the digital cooperation agenda. And so all of those will be built up toward the end of next year when we do the Summit for the Future. And the idea is that we come out with a renewed sense of where we want to go as a community around digital cooperation. So we're really looking forward to that. Pardon me. I'm just looking to see, Meilin, if there's anything else that I want to mention. If Liv is going to talk about the event, I won't go into any more detail about that, but to say that we're starting to see the digital public infrastructure topic in particular take root also across the G20 and the G7 processes. So we're starting to see more recognition of the importance of the issues and starting to see their movement into that area as well. And with the chair of the G20 going to India next year, that's one of the priority issues that have been identified by them as well for taking forward. Maybe the last thing I can do before turning over to our first speaker is just a little bit of a UNDP focused notice or information notice. We have recently published a policy brief on inclusive digital transformation. And this is really about how we see the importance of inclusive digital transformation in working with our partner countries and how we can really leverage digital, the power of digital overall, and leaving no one behind to really build better futures. And so I will, as soon as I'm done speaking, I'll put a link to the policy brief in the chat so that you can have a look. And I would encourage you to spread that around as well to your networks. With that, Meilin, I'm going to, I think, pass over to ITU. I see Alex was named as the speaker, but I see Yolanda there as well. I don't know who's
actually, we're swapping out for Liv to be speaking first, unless Yolanda, you were stepping in for Alex. Alex was going to be 10 minutes late, so Liv will go first.
Oh, okay, my apologies. So Liv,
thank you
over to you.
Thank you, and very happy to be here and for having the opportunity. I am, how should I say it, somewhat prepared, as Nelle asked me on relatively short notice to come in and give an update, but very happy to do so. So I think there are 2 updates I can give that really build on what Rob was just saying. So the first, and they're linked. So I can start with the UN General Assembly event that Rob mentioned, which is scheduled for September 21st. I will share, there is a very work in progress landing page for the event that has some basic information. So I'm sharing that in the chat now. This is an event that is co-organized. So it has an extensive number of co-hosts. So it's co-organized by UNDP and the Digital Public Goods Alliance Secretariat. So working very closely with Kayson, Robert's trusted colleague on this from my end. But we have co-hosts that in a number of co-hosts. So basically Estonia, Germany, Norway, Sierra Leone, UNDP, UNICEF, Smart Africa, and the World Bank, plus Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are co-hosting this event. So it's we're filling an entire event just by co-hosts. But it's very exciting. We have it's going to be live streamed on UN Web TV, so it's going to be open to the general public in virtually, but it is being planned as an inside the cordon physical event or hybrid event, meaning that physical participation will be very restricted for obvious reasons because of COVID restrictions, etc. And we're still finding out a lot of details, including exactly which venue we'll end up with, which will have some implications as to the opportunity for having in-person participation, also from some of those that are not speaking at the event. So there's a lot of back and forth with confirmations. You all know the drill, but we have several heads of state confirmed already, notably including among co-hosts. So we have Norway and Estonia are already confirmed at the prime minister and the president level. We also have very likely confirmation from Sierra Leone at president level, and we also have, of course, a number of the other co-hosts, and very promising signals from other high-level invitees, but I don't want to start naming anyone until they are confirmed. You will hear more about this event, but the landing page will provide updates, and I'm sure we will be able to also provide updates to this forum directly when we have something more to share. And to just then segue to the broader topic of resource mobilization, because this is an event in a way in a series of ongoing processes related to mobilizing more resources and investments in digital public infrastructure that is safe, trusted, and inclusive. So this is also quite closely coordinated with the DPG charter process that some of you have heard about, and also with efforts to create funding instruments. So there is an ongoing discussion, or there's a process to set up at least one instrument that you may have heard about called Co-Develop, which is initially initiated by philanthropic funders, but where there are also discussions with bilateral donors about coming in. So there was also a somewhat related meeting in London last week where potential donors, both for Co-Develop, but also donors that are operating in the landscape came together. So in general, I'm very encouraged to see the realization, I think, across the board for the need for investing more also in this kind of cross-sectorally enabling technologies. And of course, given that I co-lead the Digital Public Goods Alliance, I'm very encouraged by how it seems that there's a lot of convergence around how digital public goods can be an important enabler for this. And also we have very good dialogue with the GovStack initiative, for instance, about the synergies here, because as there are more and more governments and joining the GovStack initiative, we do see that, you know, the opportunity to engage the leadership of countries there and the willingness to share government technologies, open source, it seems to be really strong. So I know that both Yolanda and also Alex are here. So this is more to just cross-reference that. And Yolanda, just since you're in the meeting, thank you so much also for helping on the invitations and all of that for the UNGA event. So we're very trying to really leverage some of these other initiatives that are engaging a lot of the same stakeholders, so that we have I see an increasing, more holistic approach really to this agenda. Yeah, so happy to try to take any questions. It's early days, as you know, with UNGA, there's so many pieces that come together late in the game, but there's a lot of positive momentum. Rob, also please feel free to point out if there are things you feel I'm missing here, if I should be at a more detailed level, or if this is sufficient. Thank you.
No, thanks so much, Liv. And no, I think it's fine from my side in terms of detail. There's a lot of moving pieces, naturally, as you can imagine, to a head of state level event. And so we're not even sure about the venue yet in New York, but as Liv said, where the idea is that we'll have it live cast as well. This year I didn't mention in my intro that another feature of UNGA this year is that it's still partially in person and partially hybrid, meaning officially side events are being discouraged by the Secretariat when it comes to UNGA because of the COVID issues. And so we're navigating all of this in terms of having an event that's also in person in New York, but also has a hybrid element of it. Would anyone like to take the floor to ask any questions or make any comments about the event? Or Kate, I don't know if you want to mention something about DPG Charter as well in addition, or not to put you on the spot, but if anyone would like to come in.
I'll see if there are questions, and if not, I'll add something. Thanks.
Yes, I have a question, and that is the United States involved in the meeting, and if so, which department?
Yeah, I can say the U.S. government is invited at vice president level. We'll of course see what that ends up with. So yes, but it's invited at a cross agency level.
Wonderful, thank you.
Any other questions? Yusuf.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a question, actually, commenting on the activities in the UNGA 77. At ASREN, we are conducting something during the Science Summit, which is organized by the Science Intelligence. So it's more, we are more into digital provider. We provide research and education networks and infrastructure for research and education, but we are marketing ourselves as also, and promoting ourselves as science enabler, because our ultimate goal is to have scientists work and interact and use our infrastructure. So we'll be having our full day, maybe around full day of activities, sessions. That's for the Arab region, which I represent. And we have another session on the 20th day on dedicated for Africa in terms of digital infrastructure, how digital infrastructure can support collaboration to achieve SDGs. I will share the links to both events and just in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. And if anybody else would also like to share events, please do. I don't have a full list. Usually the Tech Envoy's office kind of compiles a sort of everything relevant to digital that's happening at UNGA. That's not quite together yet. So I know also for example, there's an event being organized by the Digital Cooperation Organization that is the Saudi Arabia-led international organization, also on the 21st of September, but I don't know the details about it. But so there will be others, and that's something, Maylin, that perhaps we can circulate through the group when we've got a better sense of what the list is. Kate, did you want to go ahead and make a comment on DPG Charter?
Sure. I'll just make a comment that there's a cross-organizational group of countries that have been working to basically run consultations over the last 6 to 7 months to actually mobilize interest and excitement in digital public goods for digital public infrastructure. So the input from that will then be encapsulated into a long-term vision framework, but also recommendations from sort of that global input process will be delivered as a white paper sort of setup framework that will be used specifically at some of these events that will take place at UNGA and ready for that period of time. Also encourage, we've presented, multiple people have presented multiple times about the charter, so we won't go into it in more detail here, but if you are interested, you could ask Rob, Liv, myself, any questions that you have, and we can also link you directly to the charter director, who is based out of Geneva. In addition to that, we're also looking to, as DIAL co-develop and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, host a dinner which will complement and sort of bookend the larger public event that Rob and Liv just spoke about. And that is really to try and encourage countries that are sort of newer to this conversation about digital public goods or digital public infrastructure to kind of join and learn and bring in sort of their insights about what is working, but also feature a number of countries who are on that path and who are already developing it. So welcome also suggestions from colleagues. It will be a quite small event. It's not meant to be sort of a large public gathering, but is really to begin to build kind of the political momentum and interest in digital public goods for digital public infrastructure. And that will take place on the 19th.
Thank you, Kate. And yes, if there's any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to Kate, me, or Liv, and to connect the dots. That is also, in support of this movement toward the Summit for the Future and the Global Digital Compact. We see the DPG Charter as one of the kind of foundational parts of that. At least that's the idea now, and we're on the roadmap. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think let's turn to the next agenda item, and Alex Wong is here now. Alex, thanks for joining us, and you're going to give us, I think, an update on WTDC, which was a fantastic event in Rwanda, and the P2C pledge, and so on. So please go ahead, Alex.
All right, thanks, Robert. Hello, everyone. Hello, Kate. So I'm talking to some of our colleagues who've been very involved with P2C. And Kate, you already received a briefing, and Robert, you're going to. So I'm just pleased to share that we had a really great outcome at WTDC. And part of that is also what's the next steps on Partner to Connect. So I'm going to provide a brief update on that. If I just put up my slides, let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on a second. Apologies. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so we are not done with P2C. That's the headline for everyone to take away. In fact, what was really exciting about Partner to Connect, and I'm going to just give a really quick recap because I'm not sure if everybody followed what this was. We've presented Partner to Connect to this group a few times now since we launched it last September, but the big headline I would say is the right-hand side of this page, which for the non-UN folk don't sort of recognize the implication of what we call a resolution, is when the member states actually gave an instruction for the ITU to continue with P2C. They were so, the member states were so impressed and happy with how P2C has developed, with, of course, many of you on this call's support, that they've now instructed the ITU to continue to follow up on the work that's been started with the coalition using the pledging or the focus area framework or the action framework, and that for ITU to continue to play a key role in how we now monitor and track and help coordinate implementation of the pledges. So what is that? Let me now step back for the background. So this was what PDC aimed to do, was to create a leadership level platform to engage all stakeholders to mobilize and announce new resources, partnerships, and commitments in the form of pledges to address meaningful connectivity and digital transformation. We worked very closely with the Office of the Tech Envoy in coordination with all the different global fora, the WSIS action lines and the SDGs. And we didn't want to focus exclusively on the LDCs and LDCs in the small island developing states, but of course, that's the community that needs the help the strongest. And you've seen this slide before for those of you that have seen this presentation. So we were really happy that we created a multi-stakeholder leadership coalition to help us develop the P2C framework and also to make pledges. And of course, recognizing here UNDP and Dial. There may be others on this call who I haven't noted. Liv, you made a pledge. I remember that. We couldn't get your video to work when you were presenting in Kigali, but thank you for your support as well. So we had this action framework around these 4 focus areas: access, adoption, value creation, accelerate. So I went through that really quickly because I've presented that before. So what happened at WTDC? So we really felt it was the first UN pledging conference focused exclusively on connectivity. And of course, really introducing this multi-stakeholder partnership model, but really focusing on the pledges. We had many of you on this call either join or make a pledge. We were happy that on the sidelines, we had discussions with the Office of the Tech Envoy to further have some consultations on the Global Digital Compact. We also had our colleagues from the OHR LLS, that's the UN Office for the High Representative of the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, if people don't know that acronym, and talked about the Doha 5 program, but ultimately it was about having speakers and ministers and business leaders make announcements. And we have a total of 425 plus pledges now valued over 26 billion. So on the bottom of this page is a link which takes you to our dashboard where you can sort of look at all the pledges and see who made them and what the pledge is all about. Now, the second important resolution that happened at WTDC was a resolution related to digital transformation. Robert, I know you presented earlier on DT, and you and I have a further discussion on this because we think this is extremely complementary to what other UN organizations are doing, such as UNDP. But we have been instructed by membership to help also facilitate a coordinated approach on how we address digital transformation. And then, of course, from the ITU perspective, we take it from a real core focus of access as a primary core area, the access itself, which is ITU's core mission. And of course, we layer on top of that the adoption and value creation, which is also where a lot of synergies happen with other organizations. So these two resolutions have led for us a clear mandate on the next steps. So we're going to continue to mobilize more pledges and focus on the areas where we see gaps. We've now committed to an annual reporting process, including a continuation of events and other activities to maintain the momentum on P2C. Our annual reporting meeting will happen in Geneva in December 8th, but we already have our first P2C event, which I think some of you have been invited to. Anyone who's made a pledge received an invite, and that Twitter is going to host for us a P2C event during UNGA September 18th, which is a Sunday, 4:30 to 7. So I think this group should feel they are invited. I can facilitate mail-in invitations for this group to attend. It includes a reception on their rooftop afterwards, but more importantly, we actually want more pledges. So everybody here who hasn't made a pledge yet should do that. And now we are also going to look at how we can catalyze in-country pledge implementation. So that's kind of the mandate of how we take it forward. Now I'm going to take this last couple of minutes to kind of give an example of how we feel P2C can help with country level national digital transformation. So within the BDT, we've created this framework on digital transformation. It looks a little familiar or bits and pieces to the UNDP framework that Robert, because we both use a wheel or a 360 view. Our focus, again, as I mentioned, is really on the access element as a core foundation, and then of course the other two elements of adoption and value creation. All this, by the way, you can't see the link on the version of the PDF that you'll receive, but we actually have this what we call BDT transformation wheel. It's posted on our ITU website on how it works and what are the different elements or the different building blocks. But essentially, what we've done is we have, and this is not P2C, this is more broader within the ITU. We have taken 206 indicators, lots of detail behind this, of course, and we, using the data, and there's some examples of the indicators listed here, are able to give a snapshot of where we think a country is on its digital transformation journey. And of course, it's only as good as how accurate the data is. And if we take that framework, and I'm not going to go through this slide, this is sort of a slide that talks through a bit of a methodology of how we can work with countries to identify where they are in digital transformation, and under step 4, bring in the P2C pledges. That's the key takeaway for this group on what we're doing with P2C, because what we're seeing with the P2C pledges is organizations are pledging that they're going to do X, Y, Z, digital skills, digital transformation assessment. That's Robert, that's the UNDP pledge. Digital public goods, Kate, tied to the DIAL coordination work, infrastructure. So we believe what's the opportunity now and what the member states want is how can we now bring in these additional resources that pledges represent to help them fill their gaps in their digital transformation journey. So this is really probably, if there's anyone on this call from Mauritania, I apologize because we keep using Mauritania as an example and probably it's not, our data is not that accurate. But Mauritania, you can sort of take their current situation, map against their current capacity based on the indicators that I shared earlier. We can then look at the pledges that were made to Mauritania. And in this case, we've had 30 pledges that either directly or indirectly indicated Mauritania as a target. So this is a little sort of word analysis or word summary of this. Plus, there's a lot of pledges that were made where a country wasn't specified, but they made a global or a regional pledge. And we have the Microsoft example where they pledged to train 10 million people. And if we then kind of look at Mauritania and we map overlay where the pledges could help fill in the wheel, this is how we can then help accelerate their digital transformation. So this is the area where we need to be making sure we're coordinating closely with our fellow UN organizations and other stakeholders in the country. This is, of course, always done in partnership with the country government. But this is a bit of a snapshot of how we think P2C can help further the digital transformation journeys within countries. And that's it. The annex just shows some of the slides that you've seen before in terms of the background on P2C. So that's a really quick snapshot of how we think we can move forward. Lots of additional conversations need to be taking place to ensure we're coordinated and working well within the system, including many of the colleagues on the call. I will stop there, Robert and Maylin, back to you guys.
Thanks, Alex. It's such an exciting set of initiatives that came out of P2C and the Kigali meeting. 26 billion is a great number to start with. It's nice that you want to have more, and I think we need as much as we can get. So, are there any comments or questions for Alex on the P2C process?
A big congratulations.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Maylin. And thank you for giving us the space to share this. You guys have sort of followed the journey along, as well as, of course, the colleagues who've been playing a key leadership role. So
I see a question from Catherine. Please go ahead.
Yes, hi, Alex. Thank you very much. This is Catherine Stover from GEANT. I have just a very simple question. I mean, immediately here on your example of Mauritania, it is very clear that the pledges have not really necessarily come in for infrastructure, and infrastructure is seen as very limited, whereas then you see quite a lot on digital economy. That's mutually exclusive. So I'm wondering, is there also a mechanism in place whereby you look at what is actually needed on the basis layers for a country to fulfill the upper layers? Because that seems is a little missing.
And Alex, just before you answer that, maybe we can just take Peter's comment or question first, and then we'll go back to you. Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Back to you, Alex. Thanks.
All right, so Catherine, the starting point is that diagnostic. We call it a 360 diagnostic. So that first slide I showed, which I guess I should just put it back on the screen really quickly. The first slide that I showed, which let me just skip down to this. This slide here, sorry, going back for, okay. This slide here is a slide that we have created for, based on the data that we have on these 206 indicators. So it's a starting point on where we think a country is based on the current data that we have. So it's the start of a conversation with that country to, number one, confirm this initial diagnostic, and number two, identify where their priorities are. Just because our data shows this doesn't mean that digital economy, I mean, just picking that as an example, is a priority. They may actually say, well, you know what, first of all, we want to correct some of the data points, but number two, our priority right now is on connectivity. So Catherine, we want to use this as a first way to start a conversation, also coordinate with our other UN colleagues in country in particular who also have data sources and also have a view. And based on their priority areas, then what we should do is look at the pledges that have been made and how can they help. Now, what's really important to note here, this slide shows an analysis of 30 pledges that were received to Mauritania, of which Mauritania as a government has made about 11, I think, themselves. There are around 80 pledges that were made globally, but did not indicate a country, which I think actually includes, for example, Robert, UNDP. So you didn't indicate which countries you're going to go in. So what we want to be able to do is go to that next level of detail back to the pledgers and say, Mauritania has actually has indicated connectivity as a priority. And in fact, I can think of 2 pledges that were made, one by Orange, who made a big pledge tied to infrastructure. The second tied was Vodafone, and asked them, are you actually interested in, is Mauritania one of the countries that you're thinking of applying this to? And we want to start the conversation where they might then say, the pledger, we weren't thinking of Mauritania, but now that you now are working with them and they've indicated this as a priority, yeah, maybe we can do something there. And I can also see Robert having that same conversation, because I don't know if you've picked who your 10 countries are. So that's the bit of the interactive, Catherine, that we want to develop, but that diagnostic is just a starting point.
No,
okay.
I'm very pleased to see that. I mean, obviously for us, we procure connectivity around the world. And we have a very good view where connectivity is missing or where it is simply unaffordable. Mauritania is exactly one of those places. And I just can't imagine any digital transformation without sound connectivity. So
excellent.
I think I'm very much with you. I think it is a very good conversation that you're having.
Okay, Catherine, I've taken note of your email because I'm going to follow up and get you to make some pledges too. And we should have a deeper conversation.
We actually have. I think the Africa Connect project has pledged. Nikki is here.
Okay.
Nikki was in Rwanda herself during the event, and the Africa Connect project has pledged, and we have pledged for increasing connectivity to African admins.
Okay, and then thank you. And I know time is ticking. The second comment, Peter, on UNESCO. On PDC directly, we have not had them make a pledge. They're aware of PDC. That's probably a deeper discussion we need. Yeah, so I'll just stop there. I mean, we're working with, there's another agenda item, Maylin, which time won't permit, which is about the Transforming Education Summit. So we are working very closely with UNICEF and UNESCO on all the latest developments on tests, including these call to actions that are happening. But yeah, we haven't coordinated directly with UNESCO on this. Excellent, excellent. There, I'll just last teaser here, Peter and colleagues. The latest on the tests in terms of the digital education agenda is a call to action framework that is sort of focusing on 3 C's: content, capacity building, and connectivity. So maybe, Peter, some of your other fingers are following that, but that's going to form the basis of a call to action, which frankly could form the basis of pledges if UNESCO, and I think it'll be UNICEF and UNESCO will be playing lead roles on the follow-up, and that could be well noted. That's well noted. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks, colleague, for those good comments. So I think we're going to, because of, I don't think we have all our presenters online right at the moment, so we're going to scramble the agenda just slightly, and we're going to, I think, next go to Maylin.
Yes.
Over to you for an update on the CHIPS Act in the US.
Great. Hi, everyone. I am delighted to actually give an update, especially while Robert Upp is here. So this is just an important development. There have been 3 US acts, and I wanted to tell you about it because I was recently in Puerto Rico with the White House delegation and delegation from the Department of Commerce, and it truly opened my eyes to what the US is doing. And we don't often cover the US, but we're going to do it now. So the amount of money is astounding. This is actually the first industrial strategy that the US is making, and highlights are shown in terms of the amounts. So just in the CHIPS Act alone, there's all of this money, and it is a true industrial policy, while whilst digital public goods have not been mentioned, it would be shame on us not to make sure that how this money is spent does not support the development of digital public goods. And I think that's why I wanted to make sure that you all knew about this. And I've given the link to this presentation in the chat. In addition to simply digital public goods, the amount of money on climate tech from these three acts is 500 billion in the next decade, with essentially renewables projected as the fastest growing US power source. So I didn't make it up that this was the first industrial policy. This is also a coherent green industrial policy. And the report was done by a not-for-profit group called RMI, and the link to the report is also in the PowerPoint. It shows that it was 362 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act, 98 billion from the Infrastructure Act, and 54 billion from the CHIPS. And this does not include additional agriculture and land-related climate spending. This is something to be truly celebrated, the US coming in such a huge way, but digital public goods need to be involved with this. And I had my eyes open to the US Department of Commerce being the US data treasury. And so it describes itself as America's data agency. And some of you may have already known this, but I was so surprised at how much is going on that I have taken the trouble to create this little PowerPoint so that you have the links. And they have the strategy going forward from 21 to 2024. And the link is also in the PowerPoint. For example, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, before she joined the ITU, she's now the US candidate for Secretary General of the ITU. Doreen was at NTIA within the Department of Commerce. They also have NOAA, the weather agency, and the Minority Business Development Agency. It was eye-opening for me how much data they actually can mobilize, and it's never been mobilized in the support of a true industrial strategy as outlined in this this PowerPoint. So why I'm bringing it to your attention is that I had the chance to listen to Don Graves, the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Commerce. I met with him several times in a series of meetings in Puerto Rico, where they were looking at how the Department of Commerce could work more closely with Puerto Rico in its development. This is relevant to us here in our DCD, because in many ways, Puerto Rico shares characteristics with developing economies. The poverty rate for children is 57%. It's really a terrible thing, but what I was really pleased to see was Don Graves. He is African-American. His leadership and his commitment is so clear. He was also under the Obama administration, the person who worked on the Detroit turnaround when he was in the Department of Treasury. And now he is within the Department of Commerce, and he's going to be working with Puerto Rico. And that actually can be a model for many developing countries, but also especially Latin America and the Caribbean. We look forward within the people-centered internet to taking whatever is done in Puerto Rico and spreading it out through the historically Black colleges and universities, as well as rural America. So my final message is this. We need the global coordination. And I know that Liv and Robert and many others on this call are working on it, but the United States needs to be brought in, and in a deep way. And so I think we need to strategize on GovStack, the global digital supply chain, digital finance and e-commerce, global trade in goods and services. The United States was spending so much money on climate as well as the CHIPS Act, means that we need the coordination through the G7 and G20, which Robert mentioned earlier. And I wanted to say that this group, Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy, has already begun that this year under the German G7 presidency. We have, in fact, been part of 10 different papers. So we can move forward with this without needing to start from scratch. We are already working with the Japan G7 Think 7, and intend to work very closely with the Indian G20 as well. So on a policy level, we need to move forward to provide this policy direction. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and so I can see you all in case people have comments or questions.
Thanks, Malin. That is really that's a perspective in a kind of cross ministry, cross discipline that I don't often see. So thank you for raising it to our attention, that we can kind of start connecting dots between that enormous investment that's going to be made with the work that we're doing. Are there any comments or questions for Malin? I don't see any, Malin. And in the, Kate, did you want to come in, or are you happy with your chat comment? Okay, thanks. I think just given where we are in terms of timing, Malin, maybe we should move on. Are we moving to ASREN now?
Yes.
Okay, so we will turn to Raed from ASREN, who's going to brief us on the open science work that you're doing.
Thank you, Raed. Yeah, thank you, Raed. That was a tour de force around looking at the potential of science and how the NRENs can play a role. Does anybody have any questions or comments? My question is, do NRENs play a role and the sort of initiatives in the commercialization of the R&D that actually happens in the universities?
We are not a university, we are not educational institution, we are a facilitator, we bring universities together. So this question can be asked to the universities who do research and whether they do engagement. But we encourage, from our side, we encourage connectivity with industry, connectivity with private sector, because they all represent the global community. So everyone has a stake. So, but from our side, we are not the decision maker or the influencer in this. It depends on the policy of the country or the policy of the university. So we are not there to answer this question. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Yusuf. And I recognize in Catherine, your hand is raised.
Yes, Yusuf is of course right. I would like to add to that there is at this point in time about 110 NRENs around the world, and they are all adapted to their national environments. And it entirely depends. So for example, the Brazilian NREN, RNP, has an innovation platform that flows through the universities into RNP and out into the commercial sector. That's an example where it works the way that you've described. In other countries that doesn't exist. But I always look at, at NRENs a little bit like, it's like ice cream, Mylene. Everybody is ice cream, but some of us are strawberry and others are vanilla, and we have stracciatella and we have Malaga and we have everything in between. The important thing is that NRENs are the not-for-profits at the table, the association, the membership-driven organizations in all of this ICT transformation. In essence, we have a very clear mandate to stay away, from the commercial sector and leave the commercial sector to the commercial sector. But that is not true everywhere where you look. So, look at us, as I say, it's ice cream. And in some cases, the ice cream is very close to what the commercial sector does as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And Catherine, your strategic leadership from the EU helping evolve the role of NRENs is particularly noteworthy. And so thank you. And may I say, it's wonderful to see a woman in that role. I will also mention that Catherine is the vice chair of the EU Open Science Cloud, and Open Science 2 is another digital public good, which should be spread around the world. And I hope that there can be more cooperation in open science. Does anybody else have?
Can I just, Mylene, yes. For fairness, I need to correct you. I'm no longer the vice chair of the European Open Science Cloud. It's a colleague of mine who is in that position now. I am, however, in the board of the German Open Science Cloud on the NFDI, the Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur in Germany. So I'm still in the open science environment, not on the European level, but on the German level. Thanks.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have any comments? I did notice that you talked about the Science Summit at UNGA at the UN General Assembly. And we happen to have in the participants, Declan Karain, who is the leader and organizer of that. Declan, did you want to say a few words about the Science Summit?
Yes, thank you, Maylene, and of course all credit to you as well. You've been a long-standing collaborator on the Science Summit, and really lovely to see some familiar faces and names. Hello, Yusuf.
Hello.
Great to see you leading the charge NRENs. And no, really, just briefly from me, we are deep in preparations for the Science Summit, which will be a major side event at the United Nations General Assembly. We will run from 13 September to 30th of September. That's just shy of three working weeks. We currently have 350 sessions. Approximately 25% of those will be so-called hybrid, as in physical meetings that are accessible online. They will be taking place in New York, and then the rest will be virtual. And I hear quite a number of people say, oh, we're fed up with Zoom and we need to get back together and whatever. And I have complete sympathy with that. However, the theme of the summit this year is inclusion, and the fact that you need a visa plus $3,000 or $4,000 to get to the UN is a major barrier for many people on our planet, and in particular women. So we just need to be very aware of that. And what we found in the last 2 or so years with our virtual activities is that, at the very least, I mean, if people are engaging through Zoom, they feel engaged. And if they feel engaged, they feel they can contribute, they can learn, they can meet other people, although virtually. So it has many benefits, and I think we need to continue to recognize that, and we will be doing that. We have a number of highlights. I mean, I won't. The program is online, and I'll share the link. But just to say, we have really a terrific lineup. We're not, we're at the same time, we're not trying to create, for example, a ministerial meeting. We have lots of ministers, but we want them contributing to dialogues and really not if you like, reading briefs. So that's working very well. We have about 40 ministers from Africa. We have a number from Latin America. We have a couple of Europeans. And again, that's a rolling process. And again, thanks to Mei Lin, we continue to have a very strong emphasis on so-called digital, and for that, we really are focusing on data enabled and digitally enabled science. And again, not everybody, Burkina Faso will never be able to build a light source or a synchrotron, and the same applies to many nations on this earth. So one of the few ways, or the only way in my view, that scientists and other stakeholders from lower and middle income countries can participate is through digital infrastructure. So this is really the only way, really. However, we also need to recognize that this calls for an enabling policy and regulatory environment, and we live in a very fragmented world. And there is not a global regulatory authority for indeed anything. So this is a challenge, but I think it's also it has to be an opportunity to look for and find ways, and to recognize the importance of trust in building scientific cooperation and collaboration. And I'm very happy that the US Office of Science and Brookhaven National Laboratory will have a day dedicated to this on the 19th of September, and we're delighted there. I'm not sure, and again, I know that some of these personalities can be a bit maybe not so pedestrian. We don't all know about them, but President Biden recently appointed Professor Burr, who is an Eritrean-born professor of many things from Berkeley, and she is now the head of the Office of Science. So she'll be speaking. So obviously delighted with that for all the obvious and many not obvious reasons. So that's fantastic. But we do have a spectacular lineup of really wonderful people, and people you've never heard of. and they all have value. They all have a contribution to make, and we want to enable and encourage that. So really, Maylin, no, thank you for the opportunity just to say hello. And no, I mean, if anybody here, has any questions or wants to participate in ways that we don't know yet, please tell me or reach out to Maylin, who's leading a number of wonderful sessions, and just allow me to just give you one example of why we do this. So and I just point to this really because Maylin is engineering one session which involves Bangladesh, and this is I think this is really wonderful because for reasons which don't matter now, some scientist approached me maybe 6 months ago from Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a population of 170 million people, 170 million people, and apparently the land size is less than Belgium, but I haven't checked that out. Maybe somebody can help me at some point on figuring that out. But the point is, Bangladesh has no biobanking infrastructure. No biobanking infrastructure. So if they don't have any biobanking infrastructure, well, then there's lots of diagnosis they're not able to do. There's lots of research that they're not doing. And again, in a population of 170 million people, this is absolutely an astonishing fact. So anyway, having had a couple of conversations, then we're doing a session called Biobanking, or rather the good scientists from Austria, from Ireland, can you believe, and from Bangladesh, are doing a one-day meeting on biobanking in Bangladesh. I'm going to look at that in a digital context. It's hugely important because, again, the digital infrastructure is what is going to enable biobanking. It's not going to be researchers sticking samples in the post. Of course it isn't. It's only going to be by data analytics, by data sharing, that biobanking and its benefits on public health in Bangladesh and many other areas can be realized. So I just wanted to point to that amongst indeed many other wonderful discussions that we'll be having as the reason we do this. And very particularly, why we're doing this is to raise the profile of science and technology in light of the General Assembly. And as you know, the United Nations will convene a summit of the future next year. So I think the people on this call have, as May Lynn knows extremely well, a huge opportunity to infuse, to educate, to inform, and to really work in a very collaborative and constructive and positive way to build these collaborations such as you have here this evening. And this, I think, is an example how the world needs to overcome fragmentation. Maylin, thank you so much, and congratulations on this excellent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. We now need to move back to the schedule, and our next speaker is a wonderful, compassionate, creative, intellectual leader. His name is John Havens, and he's with the IEEE, and he leads an extraordinary initiative from the IEEE Standards Association called Planet Positive. John, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Maylin, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. Also, I wanted to mention I'll have to drop off at 12:30 Eastern, so I apologize that I have to drop off early. But I'll go, if there's still time, for about 15 minutes, and then happy to take questions and discuss. But thank you again, Maylin, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I put in the chat room some information that's useful, and I'm also going to share my presentation. But our Planet Positive 2030 website, you can see the link there. We are still looking for committee members as part of our process, and you are all more than invited. We'd be honored to have any of you involved. Our committees meet about twice a month for about an hour and 90 minutes online as we work to create a couple of key documents I'll mention. Also, thank you, Maylin, for mentioning our workshop that's coming up at The Hague, and that's going to be September 19th and 20th. And we just had some new keynotes announced, you can see on the page. Coming in via video is Eva Kali, who's Vice President of the European Parliament. And then we have some wonderful folks from Scopes and from Raja Shatila, a dear friend from GPI, focused on areas of sustainability and artificial intelligence. Please, please, we'd love to have you come. We'd be honored to have you attend. And the logic of that workshop is to have panels and speakers. Maylin was one of our panelists at Stanford University. And I'll put a link, you can see her in the videos from Stanford. And then we will also have at The Hague, along with keynotes and panels, a 3.5-hour writing workshop. And the logic there is that with our 12 committees focusing on 12 chapters of our document called Strong Sustainability by Design, you pick a room that sounds interesting. Maybe it's economics, maybe it's rivers and lakes, and you go in and we'll send you the document beforehand and you can read the content and then provide feedback. And again, we really are focused on an iterative project involving people feedback-wise. Okay, I'm now going to share my screen and let me know, hopefully it works. I have a lot of things up, as we all do in modern times. So here we go. And let's see here. Okay, can everyone see my slide here?
No, it's not sharing, John.
Oh, okay. It looks like it's sharing for me. Is there, I'm not sure why it wouldn't be. Let's try again. Okay.
I'm not sharing it, John.
Okay, and thanks for your patience. Let's see, share.
Oh, good, it's coming.
Okay.
Got it.
Perfect. And now I'm going to do full screen. Okay, you can see? Okay. So this is an initiative supported by the IEEE Standards Association. IEEE is the world's largest technological association. It has different operating units and volunteers all around the world. One of them is the IEEE Standards Association. That's where I work. I am the Sustainability Practice Lead for IEEE SA. So we're an open global initiative. We have people from about 22 countries involved now. We've started looking for committee or community members back in February. We have about 420 people in the community and about 120 people on committees. And in terms of the phrase planet positive, it's not just positive like let's maintain a positive mood. It's an actual term used in scientific sustainable communities where the logic is you're giving back more to the planet than you take out. So you may hear terms like net neutral a lot, which is obviously admirable in what we have to do, which is not harming the planet. We can't harm the planet with technology or policy that we build or recommend. However, to sustain the planet, and sustainability is actually a synonym for longevity, meaning we want the planet to be here in 40, 50, 1,000 years to support people. That's the key thing, is the planet will be here, but we want it to support all people. So from a standpoint of equity, where all people can have access to this beautiful planet, we actually scientifically and empirically have to be replenishing Earth's ecosystems. This does not just include making sure to pull down carbon and emissions. This is things like the world's aquifers. There are about 7 aquifers in the world and the water is being depleted. So anyway, planet positive is a very specific name, and that's the background. So these risks, I think most of you already know them. We're basing all of our risks and solutions on things like the United Nations IPCC reports and the UN SDGs. This is not really news to people, but it's critically important to delineate the difference between crisis, and we are in a climate crisis or emergency. This is something, this term, sometimes people think, don't be dooms, don't talk about the doom and gloom side of things. There's a critical difference between stating urgency when it's fact, right? There's an emergency if someone is hurt and they're rushed to a hospital. That's not just, hey, that person might be hurt. It takes a status of emergency so that systems are prepared and can change for those things. That's all it is. But emergencies have been called around the world in multiple governments, where climate emergency also then, and forgive me because I'm sure I'm saying things to people on this call that you already know, but it means that now governments and infrastructure and businesses can really join together and work in ways that they wouldn't when there wasn't an emergency. So recognizing that we're in that state of emergency means we have an urgency that we really need. And for our work, the 2030, that logic is built on this urgency, which is instead of just saying, what are the solutions to help the planet, which of course is critical, and we're doing that in these different committees. It's also saying, how can we picture a beautiful 2030? And by beautiful, we have two main goals, what we call our, quote, impossible goals, but I use air quotes because they are possible, these things, but to transform society and infrastructure. Now, what this means is 2050 is when the UN IPCC reports, the first ones that came out a few years ago, said we have to remove all of the carbon from the air, the emissions by 2050. Now, most experts are saying we're really going to get past 1.5 by 2040, maybe 2038. So our logic is to say by 2030, how could we eliminate half of those carbon emissions, which things like the UN SDGs, multiple companies around the world like Unilever, these are the same things that they are saying and advocating. The reason being 2050 is far too long to wait to make these changes. And secondly, the systems level changes that we need, socioeconomic as well as technical, have to start now, and they have to be urgent. The other thing is we're not just focused on emissions, we're focused on things like water replenishment, forestation, et cetera. And again, the systems logic, how the economy affects aspects of sustainability, and how you can actually do multiple things at once. You can transform society, transform planetary ecosystems by giving, say, jobs for the green side of industry, and help economics, et cetera. So I can talk more about that if you're interested. The other thing is this first draft of a document that we've created called Strong Sustainability by Design was created to identify many socio-technical issues that are out there so that the technical expertise of the experts from IEEE can also come in and provide their thoughts and recommendations. Because IEEE having such leading expertise around the world in technology, this was saying, well, we're going to bring in a new community. There are, by the way, many academics and engineers already involved, but the logic being there are also a lot of economists, sociologists, people from around the world, men, women, a very diverse community, so that also people can raise their hands and say, hey, the technologies that have been here so far, they may be great, but have you talked to us? Because maybe we don't have the infrastructure to support that particular technology or the monetary system. So if you read these issues first, and then you make recommendations about your technology, it'll be that much more contextual and helpful, and you can bring us into the process. That's a big part of IEEE, is through consensus. And because we have people in more than 20 countries, is to say, what does sustainability, or what are your needs where you are? A lot of times in policy discussions, sustainability is framed from a Western only mindset. And I know Mei Lin and Stanford had some very powerful things to say about this. Obviously, sustainability involves the entire planet. So America, for instance, has produced, I forget what the number is, but 20% more of the carbon emissions than, I have these quotes wrong, but then say India or Africa. So the logic is beyond, a lot of economic and other issues that are critically important to think about, and trade, et cetera. There's just the empirical fact that most of the countries that are suffering the most today from climate emergencies, India with lack of access to water, Africa, same thing, climate emergencies around the world, most of the stress is being felt by the countries that did the least to contribute to things like emissions. So this is another inspiration. It's not to make people feel guilty. It's just more of a sense of, then the West, which a lot of times has done a lot of the creation of these emissions, et cetera, should be that much more engaged in including the non-Western regions of the world to say, hey, Global South, help us understand the Amazonia region, hey, Africa, et cetera, and especially the indigenous nations of the world. Indigenous or First Nations people make up about 5%, and this is from a quote from National Geographic, 5% of the world's populations. There are multiple types of, hundreds and thousands of different peoples in First Nations or indigenous peoples, but they protect about 80% of our natural ecosystems. So outside of any political issues and reparations and what have you, including indigenous people in any sustainability conversation is beyond essential, because these are also the people oftentimes that have designed the systems that have cared for our ecosystems for millennia, the best of any solutions that we have. So when you talk about technology, and I'm using air quotes because it's a big word to use, it can be a stick, it can be a LiDAR sensor on a car. It's critical to understand the people that understand the Earth's ecosystems and bring them into the design process. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do. I kind of mentioned this, but we're also excited about the story, very much so. Each committee has envisioned a 2030 where they've solved this problem, that the 50% of emissions are gone from the sky. The water is being replenished. Indigenous people are being included. Marginalized people are being included. Younger people are being included. And this is not a sort of Pollyanna, like, we're just going to sing and dance about unicorns and happiness. The point is to say, scientifically, how do we get to 2030? And we have to picture it. We actually have to imagine it and picture it. And then that's how people get excited and they go, wait, this can happen. And it also gives people the reason to recognize that certain systems as they exist, if they aren't working or they aren't including everyone, those have to change. In particular, short-termism and what I call exponential growth, or it means, for instance, when shareholder law demands an ever-increasing amount of fiscal growth, and there's no real plan for that to not be the case. This is not to say that shareholders aren't critically important. They are. But when there's a short-term and sort of an IPO mentality, and that's prioritized, that fiscal set of metrics then determines what everyone does. And that way of thinking is not going to prioritize planetary ecosystems and human well-being. Now, again, keep in mind, this might sound like a moral judgment. It's actually empirical. It's simply empirical. If there's a term in economics that they call magical thinking, which is that if you want infinite growth with finite resources, it can't happen. Again, I'm going to say that slower, and I'm wrapping up because I want to make sure I don't go over my time. Infinite growth, and I'll use the term exponential, meaning ever increasing fiscal growth as a priority for society. And if we think about GDP, gross domestic product, the main metric of success that around the world is recognized, that one set of numbers, that one set of statistics, if that continues to be, and I'll say continues, because it simply is, this has been my work for about 10 years, is in well-being or beyond GDP metrics. If that one set of numbers is the first thing that everyone thinks about for policy and business, and at least in America, individually as well, how can I be productive? I have to get back to work, right? My whole identity is largely based on work. And I don't mean the purpose of my work. I mean, I have to make money, which we all do, but it's sort of engrossing at all times, versus the first question, and it brings such relief in designing policy or technology. What if the first thing I thought of with any technology or policy I'm going to build is how does it protect and grow the ecosystems of this beautiful planet? What a great question just to think about. And the SDGs and so many ESGs provide metrics to say if the metrics of success in countries like New Zealand, in countries like Scotland, in countries like the UK, in countries around the world, these countries are doing this already. And then also saying, how do we make sure the well-being, the long-term flourishing of our citizens is increased? And that's a priority. Think of how the world would shift from a culture of competition to caregiving. And I say caregiving not in the sort of squishy sense of Let's all love each other in one sense, but in another sense, that's kind of exactly what it is. It's what if all of our first questions came, how do we keep this beautiful planet safe for the next 100, 200 years for my kids, for your kids, for all of our grandkids? And we all have friends in places around the world. This includes China and other places that understandably there's these economic concerns, and there should be, fine. But what if the priorities changed? And our first question was taking care of this planet, and the second, our kids. And things like caregiving, mental health isn't a pandemic level crisis according to the World Health Organization. But what if everything we built first, those two things were asked, how do we take care of these things first? And then how do we make profit after those things are measured? And we take a measure of those things as the true metrics of success for our modern society and move out of the Anthropocene. I think I'm going to skip some of these because I get passionate and I don't want to take too long. But we have two deliverables. We have our first document called Strong Sustainability by Design. And I mentioned, or I didn't mention, but our subtitle is Prioritizing Ecosystem and Human Flourishing for Technology-Based Solutions. So this is actually what we're trying to do with all these different chapters, is to say, all right, these solutions, you can build a solution currently in the current way that society does stuff, which is growth, etc. Okay, well, that we don't have to imagine too hard. We're already doing that. Now just go to a whiteboard and take some time with different ESGs and SDGs, and I'm happy to talk to you about this and send you chapters on this and logic, and imagine this world, but with these metrics, these objective metrics for ecosystem, mental health, etc. That is true R&D and innovation. That is different. I used to be an EVP at a top 10 PR firm. I had clients like P&G, HP, Wyeth Pharmaceuticals. I get those rooms. Those rooms say, every quarter, are we hitting our numbers? And what they mean is our priority, what we look at first is the fiscal numbers. We make decisions on the fiscal numbers. No longer. Now we have to say, what are the numbers or conditions to increase planetary flourishing? What are the numbers and systems to increase human flourishing, where all have equity, right? That's the other thing. We have to start recognizing that equity is, first of all, it's different than equality. Equality is incredibly important in human rights. Equity actually is also empirical. If you want everyone to benefit, then you have to change systems so that they all are seen and measured and counted for literally and statistically. Oh, I'm sorry, the second tool we're working on, this is my last slide, is an impact assessment tool that will probably be basing on some work of a number of different sustainability experts who've created interactive, pragmatic, Excel-based worksheets where companies can go through right now today and say, here's how our company is doing, and you get a rating, 0 to 100%. And then you have areas where you see you can work on. So we're going to say, take that assessment tool, see how you're doing, and then you can use our larger document, Strong Sustainability by Design, the standards from IEEE, use those to start making change, SDGs, ESGs, and then take the assessment tool again. So the before and after logic, getting towards this idea of prioritizing human flourishing and well-being, actually will lead to, the goal is to lead to pragmatic change. With that, hopefully I haven't gone over my time. I'll take questions if I have time. Otherwise, I'll put my email address in the chat. And I really, again, thank you to Maylin and everyone else for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, John. I'm sure people are feeling surprised that out of the IEEE comes this passion and commitment to a flourishing future. I celebrate this, what for many of us is a transformation of a very renowned institution that has not seen its softer side in this way. Thank you, John. Does anybody have any comments or questions? I'm actually looking at you, Uli. The reason is they're talking about sustainability by design, and this is something that the Hasso-Plattner Institute has also prioritized, sustainability by design. And I wondered if you had any comments.
Yeah, thanks, Maylin, for calling me in here. I'm pretty sure that John, we didn't meet so far, but I'm pretty sure that you are very well connected to the D School since you are to the D School at Stanford, and which is our sister institution. Yes, that is really one of the big topics. We are also looking for in the next years. It was not so SDG. The big frame was a very important issue at the D School since several years now, since they're there. But now it's moving more and more in the center of our interest, and that is why we are also encouraging all our project partners to think more and more in the direction John was pointing on. And I'm very happy to learn today that there is a European event. I was trying to get to come to Stanford to be at your first event there, but there was a personal issue which kept me from doing that. I just took the note already, so I'm planning to come to Denver.
Yes.
To Hague.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And please say hi and let's grab a cup of coffee when you come. That would be great to chat more, Yuli. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Great. And John has shared his presentation in the chat, and we will be linking it in the agenda. Does anybody have any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Peter. Peter Fagerstrom of Educraftor.
I'd love to talk to you. And yes, education is critical. And so thank you so much on both counts.
Great. Okay, now we've heard a little from Peter Fagerstrom, and he is our final and wrap-up speaker for this 2-hour session, which we have every month. We missed last month because it was the summer break, July, but we will be continuing every month. I was delighted to have our guest chair, Robert Opp, today. Nellie Loss sends her best wishes. She was unable to come, but Robert manfully stepped in. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Fagerstrom of Educraftor. Peter and I and Joseph Knoll and Matt or Arrow met for 4 wonderful days in Tallinn, Estonia in June. And I know that what he's talking about is extremely important, and I am delighted to have him as our final speaker. And after he finishes, that will be the end of our session. Go ahead, Peter. Thank you, Peter. This was a really helicopter tour of the whole big diagram. Perhaps you could show the whole herringbone so that we can see all the pieces fitting together. I personally was very impressed with what I saw in Estonia. I visited in June. I met with Peter and Matt Arrow and Josef Knoll from the University of Oslo. We had some days of conversation about what was happening in Estonia and how those interoperable elements could really benefit education. I see Dorothy has her hand up. Dorothy, please. Yes. Go ahead, Peter. Dorothy, perhaps you'd like to say something about Ghana. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's been a lot of information, but we have the recording, and you'll be able to access it when we send out the agenda for next time. So thank you, Peter, very, very much. And may you all have a good month ahead. And we will see you. We are not going to have a session in September because that's when so many of us are involved with the UN sessions. So the next meeting will be in October, and I will send out the invitation. So thank you all, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Kristen. Thanks for being with us.
Take care, Malin.
Okay, I'm going to turn this off. Bye-bye, everyone.